It shows you how much slave labor there is in the U.S. Good evening. Well, close enough. Welcome to today's edition of Rollin' Rambles. Today I want to talk about illegal aliens. Now, what do I mean when I say illegal aliens? Well, I'm not talking about the things in the UFO that didn't come here legally. Those aliens I pledge my undying loyalty to and will serve my new overlords well. No, when I say illegal aliens, I mean what people use soft language to colloquially refer to as undocumented workers, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The truth is that if you come to the United States and you do not do so following the laws for coming to the United States and staying in the United States, you are an illegal alien. You are not an illegal immigrant because immigrants come here legally. Illegal immigrant is really a bogus term that's used to soften the hit of illegal alien. And you're definitely not an undocumented immigrant or undocumented worker, because undocumented implies that there's nothing wrong except for the fact that a piece of paper hasn't been filed. Reduces the entire concept of citizenship or just permission to enter a nation to, oh, it's just a piece of paper, bro. It doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, then why are you making such a big deal out of it? If it's just a lack of documentation, and it's that trivial, then why are you having such a fit whenever people get kicked out of the country? It's just a lack of documentation, bro. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is the ghost towns that have been created by a lack of illegal aliens. I want you to think about this. In the news, after Donald Trump started his ICE raids, we saw no shortage of reports and pictures and video of places with nobody there. Construction companies claiming that most of the crew was missing from the work site because, gee, I wonder why. Amazon warehouses that are effectively ghost towns that are having a hard time fulfilling orders because, gee, I wonder why. Why isn't anybody there? Oh, that's right, because they're afraid that they're going to get deported for being here illegally. Let's think about this for just a second. You have Amazon construction sites. You have no shortage of places that don't have people now because those people are afraid they're going to get caught and deported. Regardless of what you think, regardless of your morality or what virtues you like to signal about regarding illegal aliens, or if we want to be cushy for you, undocumented workers, I want you to think about the fact that these companies that are hiring these people, that first of all, they're doing so illegally because it's not legal to hire illegal aliens. You're actually required, and when I had people working for me, I was required to collect identifying information to prove that they were actually lawfully able to work in the U.S. We are talking about people who are employed outside of the law. That means they're also employed outside of minimum wage laws. They do not have the same requirements for things like living conditions or pay or benefits or whatever that you in your cushy American citizen life do. But you're still competing with them. You're being forced to compete with them. This is part of the problem with globalism in general, is that it's not an even playing field when you got somewhere like here where we live a first world, classically Western, where we live a life that is honestly pretty good. We have a pretty high standard of living here. But other countries exist which do not have a high standard of living. And the people that are in those countries can afford to work for pennies on the dollar because those countries are so poorly managed that people have no choice but to live off of pennies a week. You know, working for peanuts would be a bit of a pay increase. So that's not great, forcing us here to compete with that. One of the big problems with all of the manufacturing and, well, really the manufacturing, but a whole lot of stuff going to China and being outsourced to India is that there's no shortage of slave or slave-like or indentured servitude-like labor in those countries. So yeah, we get a bunch of cheap stuff here, but then we can't afford to buy it because you have an American worker that's previously, say, fighting for a $15 minimum wage because they mistakenly think that minimum wage is somehow going to give them more money when the real minimum wage is always going to be zero. But then that goes up to 20 due to inflation. So we got Americans trying to fight for a $20 minimum wage in some high-cost states like California or New York or whatever, and then they're forced to compete directly or indirectly against some guy in China that is literally working for free as a slave to the government or some corporation or some powerful businessman, or in India, where there's this friggin' caste system that's illegal but still unofficially enforced by people. There's all kinds of human rights abuses happening around the world. And somehow we got Selena Gomez crying about, I guess it's not okay to have empathy for other people. Well, by empathy for other people, you mean taking people who are in places and then bringing them here out of some misplaced sense of compassion. But what you're really doing is saying, hey, people trying to make 20 an hour so that you can survive and have a living wage. Yes, screw you. This guy will work for 20 cents an hour. Or this guy's slaveholder in China or India or whatever is willing to give us their free labor for the low price of 20 cents an hour. And that's what you have to compete against. You cannot have a first world lifestyle if you're if you are forced to compete against a third world country that's full of human rights abuses that exploits people essentially for free work. I regret to inform you of this, Karen, but slavery is not okay just because you put 3 levels of indirection between you and the slavery. And it does ultimately come back to bite you and everybody else in the country in the butt. Because what happens whenever you're forced to compete against people who essentially do it for free or for nearly free? That's right. You can't compete with that unless you lower the expectations of, yourself. You've got 2 kids to feed. You got 2 kids and a disabled spouse. Well, that's really too bad. Because you see, Billy Bob Xingwan, whatever, in rural China in a labor camp is willing to weave that shirt together for basically free so that they don't get shot in the head. And if you can't compete with that, well, that's really not, that's just greed. That's just capitalist pig greed. You are a greedy capitalist for expecting a living wage. And this is what blows me away. How many videos have I made about this stupid subject already? I don't understand how you can be the kind of person that screams demanding a living wage, that you think everyone is entitled to a living wage. But then on the flip side, you go, but let's also bring in all these people that are off the books that we know will be employed as essentially slave or indentured servant labor for pennies on the dollar, and undercut all of those people that are supposed to get a living wage. And what's your excuse for this? How do you explain away this cognitive dissonance? Well, you see, that wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for corporate greed. As if corporations somehow could just, they have an infinite pool of money that they choose not to go and grab the money out of the pool simply because they just don't like Americans. Okay. Except the problem is, that's not how business works. How business works is you produce the product as cheaply as possible without sacrificing quality, sometimes with sacrificing quality if that's what your customers demand. But you produce the product as cheaply as you can without destroying the product itself. And then you sell it for the highest price that you can. Competition ensures that wages stay up and prices stay down. But too much competition from unfair sources, like places with literal slave labor camps, or effective slavery outfits that, or indentured servitude outfits where you get substandard living. People basically live in filth and are grateful to have some rice to eat every once in a blue moon. Well, yeah, everybody's going to get dragged down. companies losing all of these people because they're afraid they're going to get deported, it shows you how much slave labor there is in the U.S. And let's address real quick the own that these people try to drop every time any of this is discussed in the news. Somehow these people think it's a huge win whenever they go up in the news and say, oh, well, all these people, you want all these people deported? Well, enjoy paying more for eggs or whatever. Enjoy paying more for food since nobody's gonna be there to pick the apples that you buy. Enjoy paying more for fast food because now these people won't be there. Enjoy paying more for houses because you won't have a bunch of illegals to build the houses, and they think this is a win. No! Oh my God, no! It's not a win for you. If anything, it's the ultimate loss for you. Your entire point boils down to feel bad for humans. Feel bad for humans. Do things because you feel bad. Don't think about anything else other than the human cost. End of story. Feel bad for other people. Well, honey, I can't save the world. I'm one guy. The world is like 8 or 9 billion people at this point. There is no way, not any day of the week, that I can save even 10 people, let alone 1 million or 1 billion. I cannot save the entire third world by simply reducing my standard of living a little bit. Amazon can't save the entire third world if only they just pay up a little bit more. It doesn't work like that. That they don't have an infinite pool of resources you can just go dunk in all day long. It doesn't work like that, Karen. Calm down just a bit and use your brain. If there's any of it left after you're done drinking your 8th box of wine and snorting your 5th cat urine. That's a reference to South Park. If you don't get it, you don't get it. It's okay. Yeah, we're not going to just be like, oh, I feel bad for the poor people who come up here from Honduras or whatever, that life was rough for them down there. Yeah, my grandfather used to have a thing that he'd say to me whenever I'd whine about trivial crap, or I'd whine about, the difficulties of life that everybody has to go through one way or another. Things are tough all over. They really do need to toughen up. If there's a problem in Honduras or Costa Rica or Guatemala or Bolivia or whatever, I don't care where it is. If you live somewhere and that somewhere has serious problems, go overthrow your government. Go deal with your problem. If you have a problem in your country, deal with it. Don't come here and then be like, well, I'm entitled to stuff because I exist and am human and I come here. That's not how it works. You need to clean up your own house. Don't move into mine and then crap up the place because, Karen over here is trying to get whatever, the landlord or the state or whoever to, go along with their feels that, oh, and by the way, Karen's not affected directly, of course. I don't care, all right? I can't care. I'm one guy. I can't care about that many people. It is very commonly said and understood that people can only manage about 150 relationships with other people at any given time of their lives. So you can only realistically handle about 150. And these people are like, oh, we're going to save thousands or millions from poverty and hunger and misery by making everybody in the entire country somehow simultaneously will scream that everybody deserves a living wage, but then we're going to bring all these people in that we're the big, rich, fat, liberal, white woman savior, because that's what most of the people advocating for this are. They're rich, fat, liberal, white women. We're going to save all of them. Somehow we're simultaneously going to save all the people in the third world by using other people's money and resources, but never sacrificing anything of ourselves. But then also, it's unfair that people in this country don't make enough money to survive off of a single McDonald's job. That is unfair, and they should get paid more money. Inflation? What's that? Inflation? No, I'm not talking about balloons. No, why are you bringing up balloons? We're not talking about that. What do you mean monetary inflation? Well, what does that have to do with paying McDonald's workers more money? Well, it has to do with the fact that it's an inflationary force. And economics is not as simple as you have box with light, you flip switch and light go on. It doesn't work that way. A lot of things don't work that way. Frankly, whenever I saw all of these ghost town things where there weren't any people because all the illegals went home and hid, I was ecstatic, because it finally, normal people get to see just how many slaves they are being forced to compete with on a daily basis for wages, for housing, for all kinds of necessary resources just to survive. Never mind thrive. If you want to know why it is that rent is extremely high, that houses are unaffordable, I mean, yes, there are other forces at work. Like I said, economics is not just a simple box where you flip a switch and things change unilaterally. But in general, if you take a place that has a certain number of people and you increase the population by 30%, and you don't have a requisite increase in housing and grocery stores and such, like all of these things required to support a population have not increased. That is the nature of supply and demand. You are increasing the supply of people, and therefore the demand on resources required to survive. Therefore, the resources go up in cost. And yes, at some point, maybe it'll level out to not be quite so high. But guess what? There is one thing that is 100% guaranteed. It'll never happen. You'll never be able to make those two numbers, like you're never going to get more people and have everything stay the same because of you injecting magical thinking into it. Magical thinking isn't going to pay the rent, Karen. Magical thinking isn't going to save the third world, Karen. Magical thinking is not going to make all these illegals join hand in hand and sing Kumbaya, Karen. Do you think that Juan Pancho from El Salvador is going to think about your magical thinking as he's raping your young daughter and then be like, oh, I guess I shouldn't be doing this, I'm going to stop? No, probably not going to happen. Gee, I wonder why. Because guess what? When you just let other countries dump everybody that they want across the border without any checks, it doesn't end well for you. It doesn't end well for anyone. So yeah, you can keep on going on, but eventually it does bite you to have all of these people here that are not supposed to be here, that have broken the law to get here, that knew what they were doing was wrong, and they did it anyway. And if you try to appeal to some general humanity or to the fact that they have children or whatever, that's not my problem. That's their problem. Who hurt those kids? And this is a very common issue when dealing with any of this stuff where there's a human cost. If someone has children and they come here illegally, knowing that what they're doing is wrong and not caring, and the children have to suffer because of them doing that, how can you say that it's my fault for saying we should deport them? How can you say that it's my fault their children are suffering? I didn't bring the child here. I'm not the one who wrote the laws. Ultimately, they made the choices that led up to the suffering. Not me. I'm not responsible. And you know what? You're not responsible either. Maybe we're indirectly responsible, but see, I advocate for following the rules. You advocate for breaking the rules. The rules exist because there's no such thing as an infinite resource. It does not exist. Now, granted, sunlight could be seen as somewhat of an infinite resource, but even then there's only so much of it that lands on the earth. So even then there are limitations. All resources are inherently limited, and that's the bottom line. Looks like my microphone's dying. So, I hope that this has been educational. You know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that garbage. And thanks for joining me. That red light is really sinister. Genius. Why you get in front of me and then try to turn in front of me? You dingus. Crap, what was I saying? Oh, yeah.